We're now going to translate our third unit from this past year. It begins on Daf Chav Vav Amud Bet, and it goes to the top of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. This is a discussion about multiple people involved in a murder. Vama Rabba also says the following: what happened? Zarak Tinok Mirosh Agag. If a child was thrown off of a roof, we said the reason why it's a Tinok is because to make sure that we know we're talking about a murder where the person is defenseless. So we're going to say a defenseless person to be a little more sensitive. Zarak Tinok Mirosh Agag. If a defenseless person was thrown off a roof, Uba Acher B'Kiblo B'Sayef, and someone else came along and stabbed this person, literally caught this person on a sword. What's the halacha? So you have two people involved in a murder. One was the pusher, one was the stabber. In that case, it's pilut, it's machloket to Rabbi Yehuda Meteira, between Rabbi Yehuda Meteira v'Rabbanan, and the rabbis. How do we know that? Dit Tanya, like it says in a bright. It's important to notice that Dalid means like it says. Tanya, Dit means like. Tanya says it says in a bright. So like it says in a bright. I'm going to prove to you. How do I know that in this case there'd be a machloket between Rabbi Yehuda Meteira and the Rabbanan? Because it also says in a bright to the following case: Hikau asara b'nei adam b'asara maklot. If 10 people, Hikau beat the victim. Asar b'nei adam means 10 people. Hikau asar b'nei adam. If 10 people beat him, ba'asar maklot, with 10 different sticks, bein bebar achad, whether they did it all at once and you could not identify the murderer, bein bazachar, that whether they did it one after another and you know the last person to hit this person, kulan, we'll go to the next page, pturin, they are all patur. That's the opinion of the Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meteira says, Bezeh achar zeh, when it's one after another, so you know who went last, ha'acharun chayav, the last person is chayav. Why? It literally means he brought this person closest to death. He brought death upon this person. Because this last person was actually the person who took the life away from this person, from the victim. Would the victim have died anyway? Very possibly. Irrelevant. Since this person was the one who took the victim's life away with that last smack with the stick, therefore that person is chayav. So in a situation where you couldn't tell who the murderer was because they all did it at once, everyone agrees you're patur. But in a case where you know who the murderer is, the last person you can identify the last person is, but there were multiple people involved, the Rabbanan say everyone's still patur. Rabbi Yehuda says no, actually the last person is chayav. So that works in our case as well. That in our case, if one person is pushed off a roof and then another person stabs him with a sword, so you have two people involved in a murder, but we know who the last person was. So the same way the Rabbanan would say patur in this case, right? One after another with the sticks. The Rabbanan would say patur in this case, in our case, person being pushed off a roof. And they say where Rabbi Yehuda ben Meteira says chayav in this case, because you know who the last person was, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meteira would say chayav in our case as well, that the person who did the stabbing would be chayav. So that's how you know there's a machloket between Rabbi Yehuda ben Meteira and the Rabbanan in the off the roof case, because there's also a machloket in a similar case, and you can apply the ruling from one to the next. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is, well, where do they get their opinions from? Why do the rabbis think that even if you know who the last person was, since there's more than one person involved, everyone's patur? And why does Rabbi Yehuda ben Meteira say, no, if you know who the last person was, the last person is actually going to be chayav? Where does that come from? So the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, which we're not going to look at now, tells us that this is all based on a pasuk. The pasuk you're looking at here, V'yishke akeh kol nefesh adam mot yimat, is the pasuk in Sefer Vayikra, which tells us that the punishment for murdering somebody is the death penalty. So the pasuk says the following: V'ish, and a person, ki akeh, when they will smite, when they will damage, they will injure, they will hurt, kol nefesh adam, all of the soul of another person, mot yimat, they will die. So what do you have to do in order to get the death penalty? Ki akeh kol nefesh. You have to injure, damage, hit kol nefesh of a person. What does kol nefesh mean? So there are two possibilities of what kol nefesh means. Either it means kol nefesh can mean all of a person's soul, meaning you have to do it all yourself, all of a person's life, or kol nefesh might mean any part of someone's life, even if it's only part of it. So how does that play out? If you read it, ish ki akeh kol nefesh adam mot yimat, meaning all of a person's life. If a person will damage, injure, smite, kill all of another person's life, mot yimat. That has to be all of it. But if you take part in it, but if there's somebody else involved, then 100% you're going to be patur. So that's the opinion of the Rabbanan. They say kol nefesh means all of the soul of a person. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meteira says no, kol nefesh means any part of the soul, any amount. To the ish and a person, ki akeh kol nefesh adam, if you kill any part of a person's soul, mot yimat, you have to die. Now, what does it mean? Doesn't mean that, if I go and chop someone's finger off, I get the death penalty. But if you are involved in murdering somebody, and we know you're the last person to go, if it's kol nefesh, if it's any part, if you took any part of that, even if it's only part of it, since you were the last person to go, you can get the death penalty. So depending on how you understand kol nefesh, that would explain how you decide whether whether the last person can be killed if they didn't do it all by themselves, but they were the last person to go. This is what we call a drasha, taking the words of the pasuk and understanding it at a deeper level to teach us something. So if you take a look at Rashi, you'll see the same thing. Rashi up here where it says patur, in explaining why do the rabbis say you're patur even if you were the last person to go and we know that you took this person's life away. Let's zoom in a little bit. So why is that? So Rashi says the following: Paturin, Diba'in, that you need shiakeh kol nefesh adam, that you injured, you hurt, you damaged kol nefesh, the entire soul of a person. Kol nefesh, ve'ein kan makeh kol nefesh, upturin mita. But here, ve'ein kan, here there is no makeh kol nefesh, there's nobody taking the entire soul of a person, therefore upturin mita, you don't get the death penalty. As we pointed out, you might still be considered a murderer by God, but you don't get the death penalty here. The Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira chayav, but why does Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira say chayav if there isn't all of the soul? Zeh shekiblu b'sayav, he says the person is chayav. Why? Because you brought that person's death closer. And as we pointed out, he understands kol nefesh as kol dehu nefesh, any amount, even if it's only part of. I shouldn't say any amount, any part of. If you brought this person to death and you had part of the soul, kol shu nefesh, so then you can get the death penalty. So now just to review, let's read the Gemara from the beginning. The Amar Rabba says the following: Zarak tinok mirosh hagag. What if a defenseless person was thrown off a roof? Uva acher, and someone else came along kiblo b'sayaf and caught them on a sword. So in such a situation, piluta, it would be a machloket, a dispute to Rabbi Yehuda Meteir, between Rabbi Yehuda Meteir, Rabbanan, and the rabbis. Ditanya, as it says in a Braita. If 10 people beat somebody with 10 sticks, whether it happened at once, whether it happened one after another, kulan, all of them turin are patur. That's the opinion of the rabbis. That's their opinion. So if there's more than one person involved, everyone's patur. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira says no. When it's one after another, the last person is chayav, because he brought the victim to death. And therefore, it's the same way that they would say that when there's 10 people beating somebody, if there's more than one person involved, if we know who the last person was, who actually brought this person to death, that person gets a death penalty. So too in the case of someone being thrown off a roof, the second person who caught the person on a sword and actually killed them would get the death penalty as well, where the rabbis would say patur, and that's how we know there's a machloket.